Hi, welcome to the Talk Spot. This is Marcus, and today I'm joined by Terry Lovelace. Terry, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about your story.
Thank you, Marcus. Again, my name is Terry Lovelace. I was born in East St. Louis, Illinois. I'm raised in South St. Louis City. After I graduated from high school, I joined the United States Air Force. This was in 1972 as the Vietnam War was winding down, and I signed on as a conscientious objector. I was a medic and trained as an EMT, and that's what I did for 6 years. I was a medic and EMT working out of an emergency room at a SAC base. SAC stands for Strategic Air Command in western Missouri, known as Whiteman Air Force Base. It's where the Air Force currently houses the B-2 bombers, the stealth bombers. And I was there for 6 years, and that is when my event happened, my major event. I had some couple minor events. When I was 8 years old, in my backyard in St. Louis City, I saw a flying saucer once, and ran inside. Mom, did you see it? So I was just so excited. It was because it really was an incredible experience. But of course, when you're 8 years old, especially back then in the day, children were discounted and not believed, and So I had an experience early on in life, and this experience happened not while we were on active duty, but while we were on leave. We took some time, and my buddy was from Flint, Michigan. He had never been camping in his life. Now, Flint's an urban area. He lived in a poor urban area, and I lived in an urban area in St. Louis. I had never been camping in my life. So where this idea to go camping came from, I don't know. He came to me and he's like, man, let's do the camping trip thing. This will be fun. We'll enjoy it. It'll be a good time. And I'm like, nah, come on. What do we know about camping? For some reason, the idea really stuck with me. And we went. And we had an adventure. We decided, despite the fact that there were about a half dozen nice state parks within about a 45-minute drive of the base, we decided to go to a park called Devil's Den in northwestern Arkansas, a little over 6 hours away. And the attraction was, it was remote, and there were eagles there, and I was into photographing wildlife. I had a little dark room where I could develop black and white prints. And my friend was an amateur astronomer, and he lived to see the night sky. I mean, he knew all the constellations. He could tell you when the satellites were going to come over. I mean, he just really was into the night sky. And he made a good point too. We were going to stay at a campground, and he's like, no, let's skip the campground. It's going to be full of kids and other undesirables, and hippies smoking weed, and it's going to be crammed in with people right next to you. And if we want a wilderness adventure, let's skirt the park rangers, and we'll sneak into the back of the park and camp in this remote area that's cordoned off as a wildlife preserve with no admittance, certainly no camping. And that's what we did. We snuck past this chained off part of the road, and we drove and kind of took the trail leading up, seeking a higher piece of ground. And we found a really cool place. We found it was the perfect place to set up a campsite. The highest elevation you could see anywhere. I don't know what it was in feet, but it was the high piece of high ground. And it was a large, what I referred to as a meadow, with grass that was about almost knee-high in length. And it was just gorgeous. It was an absolutely beautiful place to set up camp. And we did. We set up camp, and despite being amateurs, we kind of bumbled our way through it, and burned some hot dogs, and did the normal things you do when you camp. And it really was a nice evening. I mean, we didn't party, we didn't drink. he was watching the night sky, and I was getting set up for an early morning of hopefully photographing some eagles. So we're sitting around a campfire in these blow-up air mattresses. And my friend, well, before I go there, I should say that it was kind of an odd event. We had been laughing and having a good time, and there came a lull in our conversation. And I noticed that all these noises that we'd heard earlier, like the crickets and the tree frogs and just the normal sounds of the woodlands, had all gone. It was dead silent. I mean, you could drop a pin. It was crazy. And I said, Toby, man, is this right? This seems unnaturally still to me. And he's like, oh, man, don't worry about it. We've been laughing and cutting up and, just wait. They'll be back. The crickets, they'll be back in an hour. You just watch. I also noticed a stillness because the two went together. They were two distinctly different things. There was the silence, but there was also this weird stillness in the air. And that stillness, I could see a tree in back of our tent, illuminated by the campfire. And the campfire's flickering. And I focused my attention on a leaf. And I'm thinking, there's very little breeze. Actually, I could feel no breeze, but that's got to move. I mean, it has to move. A leaf on this tree has to move sometime. And I had this eerie feeling that I was looking at a hologram or looking at an image. It's hard to describe. I know it sounds crazy, but it wasn't just the silence. It was an overall, just a really eerie feeling that creeped me out pretty bad. My friend was oblivious, but about this time, he turns his head to the left and asks me, were those lights there before? And I'm looking over his shoulder, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And he points in the direction of the west, and there were 3 stars about the size of the North Star in intensity and size, and they sat in a tight little triangle, each point being equidistant from one another. And it sat above the horizon. They were too low to be airplane lights or something like that, and they were too high to have been like a roadway or a parking lot. It just didn't fit. It's just something about it was unnatural. And while we're debating what these things could be, they moved and they rotated like they were on an axis, and they made one about 3/4 of a turn and then stopped again. And we got kind of excited. We're like, whoa, that was pretty cool. And we're, still debating, is this some type of aircraft? Could it be a hot air balloon? No. Then it moves again. And it starts to move up. And I distinctly recall, at the moment that I saw that thing start to move up, I felt this feeling of calm wash over me. It was a feeling that I'd say was very close to sedation. But I felt absolutely at ease, just peaceful, calm. And I asked my friend, I said, hey, Toby, I think what I asked him was, are you scared? And he says, no, I'm not scared. It was just I don't think there were like 3 or 4 words spoken between us while we watched this thing. And it became evident pretty quickly that this was one solid object and not 3 independent objects moving in unison somehow. And as it got larger, as it grew bigger and started to move up faster, we could see as it would pass fields of stars, it would blot them out. It would come back into view once the object had passed over them. And it continued to get bigger. And there's no conversation. We're not talking. I can feel this sedation wash over me in waves. And it was just very odd. And it came to a point where it was at the bottom of the valley, and it was a crystal clear evening with there were trillion stars out, and the light from the stars illuminated the whole valley and the meadow we were on. And it was spooky. We could see this giant triangle shadow move right underneath the three points of light in the sky. And I guessed its height at about 3,000 feet, maybe 3,500 feet, no more than that. And it was very big. It was big. It was, I'd say, a city block on each length of the three sides of the triangle. And still, neither one of us have any feelings of anxiety or anything other than calm. We're just sedated. And this thing stops, and it's directly over our heads, or almost directly over our heads. We're kind of offset. We're set up in our camp along the tree line, and this thing is kind of centered over this meadow. And the three lights on each point of the triangle were still there. They were on. So they lit up the surrounding area pretty well. Pardon me. Then there came a light from directly underneath this thing in the center. There came a light, and it was a visible beam of light. It was like looking at a searchlight cutting through thick fog, but there was no fog. It was a crystal clear evening. It was just this odd visible light, and it was white, and it turned on just like someone flipped a switch, and it came from the center of this craft, from dead center of the bottom, and the point of light landed in our camp fire, and that's where it stayed. It stayed there for just maybe a minute, and then turned off. And we're just amazed by this. And then a second light comes on, again, like someone flips a switch. It just is there. And it was pencil thin. It was purplish. The white light turned off. And then in its stead, there came this laser beam. And 1977 lasers were kind of a new concept. I knew what they were. I'd seen them on television, but I had no familiarity with them. And this laser beam would appear in our camp at a location and stay there for literally a tenth of a second, and then turn off, and then turn on at another location, so that it would go on and off at different locations like 10 times a second. So it gave this weird illusion that this thing was dancing all around the campsite. And this beam of light struck me in the head and chest. I didn't feel a thing. I know it hit my friend, and it hit our car, it hit our tent, and I had the feeling that, this thing's checking us out. But again, no fear, no anxiety. And that lasted for probably 3 minutes, and then it stopped. Again, like someone just turned off a switch. And we sat there, and there was no conversation. But I recall noting that there were no tree frogs, no crickets, that stuff had not returned. I was just sitting there, soaking up this stillness, this weird ambience. And my friend says, kind of loud, kind of abruptly, and kind of startles me. He says, "Well, show's over." And he gets up, and he drags his air mattress in back of him, and he goes inside his tent, our tent, this little cheap $10, Kmart tent. And he throws his air mattress in, and he falls face down in it, and he's out. And I didn't bother to remove my boots or my shirt. I just threw my air mattress in, and I fell face first down on it. And my last thought was, "You were wrong, man," because the crickets and the tree frogs never did come back. And that's all that I remembered. I was out. And afterward, we calculated that we had been out probably about 4 hours. Both of our watches had stopped at 2:40. I woke up sometime around 3:15ish, and when I woke up, I was confused, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, we're camping," and there's these lights, these shining through the canvas of the tent, are these brilliant green, yellow, white lights that just illuminated the whole inside of the tent. And I'm confused. I'm thinking, well, this must be park rangers here to kick us out. or this is, maybe some kind of a emergency vehicle. There was a droning sound, a sound like an engine, because it was the first noise we'd heard since before the crickets stopped. And I thought, somebody running a generator in the back of a truck? That doesn't make any sense either. And it was just crazy. And one of the flashes of light that was particularly bright, I noticed my friend is on his knees peering outside of the tent. And I also noticed tracks of tears down his face. He'd been crying. And for the first time, that scared me. And I had real anxiety at that, because I couldn't, for the life of me, I could not imagine what in the world would scare this man. We had worked together and, been in some dangerous situations, airplane crashes and the like. And he always kept his head, and I didn't get it. And he was just engaged at watching something in the metal. He's on his knees, and he had peeled back the flap of his tent. And I spoke up and I said, "What is it, Toby?" He said, "Park rangers." And he shushed me, with the universal sign, his finger across your lips to be quiet. And he told me in a whisper, "Be quiet, they're still out there." And I'm still confused. I still don't have my wits about me. And I'm like, "Who, Toby, who?" And I lean over and I push him with my left shoulder, and I'm on my knees. It's a tiny tent. And I peel back that right flap, and I look out, and in this meadow, there's about 10, it's more like 12 to 15, what I thought were kids. And I'm like, "Toby, what the hell are these kids doing out here, man? It's in the middle of the night. Doesn't make sense." And he's shaking. He's shaking like he's cold, and he's crying softly. And he says, "Man, those ain't no little kids." And I said, "Who are they, Terry?" And he said, "Man, those ain't no human beings. They took us, and they hurt us. Don't you remember?" And when he said that, I did remember. And I had flashes of memory from this event. And it was scary. It scared me to death. And some of those memories became the basis of nightmares that I suffered for 40-plus years and still occasionally have them. They were frightening. And these little guys were all identical. They were all under 4 foot. But you could tell they weren't human beings. They walked with a distinctive gait. They walked like their feet were sore, if that makes sense. It was just an odd gait, unique. Their heads were disproportionate in size to the rest of their torso, and their arms were disproportionately long to their legs. They were all dressed identical in some kind of like gray jumpsuit with boots on, and they seemed to be just checking the place out. I saw several of them bend over and pick up a handful of grass, wildflowers, and there came a light. It was the same quality of light as that light that hit our campfire earlier. It was that solid beam of visible white light that lit up, and it was about 30 feet in diameter, and it was just a giant circle of visible white light. Again, like someone flips a switch, it's on. And as soon as it comes on, it's like somebody rang a bell or something. These guys immediately, all of them, turned, and not in any hurry, they didn't run, but they all headed for this beam of light. And when they walked into the beam of light, they would dissolve into it and just be gone. And we watched them for probably 3/4 of an hour. Like I say, they weren't in a big hurry, but the last pair dissolved. And when they were gone, the light turned off, again, like someone had flipped a switch. And we were both so scared. I can't express to you how frightened I was by this. And it affected my life, and it affected my view of things. For instance, I'm not comfortable being out in the open. I'll walk an extra half a mile rather than cut across a field and be in the open. I don't like open spaces. I don't like to be out at night. It's got to be a place that's well lit and preferably with a lot of people around. Of course, I had 40 years of nightmares about this event. but it changed us in a couple of ways, and not for the good. And I don't think these things really intended to hurt us. I really don't think so. I did at first, but my opinions kind of softened over the years, and I don't think they were. Intent on doing us harm. I think they had an agenda, and part of that agenda involved doing some kind of medical-like procedures to us. It also involved we were radiated some way. The inside of this, they took us inside of this craft. The most striking thing about this craft was the fact that the inside, the interior, was like 3 times the size of the exterior. Now that makes no sense, but that's what it was. It somehow they had the ability, either they took us to another ship, or they had the ability to somehow mess with mass or energy or something, and expand the inside and have the outside look much smaller. And I recall I couldn't move. I was standing. Toby was next to me. We were both nude, and we had our clothing in our boots in a bundle, and we had them we were holding them in our hands. And it was the first real memory that I had being inside this place. And I heard this woman, and there are different kinds of screams. I mean, you yell boo at somebody as they walk around the corner, and then they scream. But this woman was screaming, and her screams were sharp. Because obviously it was a pain response, and she was screaming like for her life, and that was really frightening. And the next memory I had was that the woman had stopped screaming, and Toby was gone, and wherever they had him, I heard him distinctly say, "Oh my God, no, oh my God, oh my God," and then he's screaming, and it's not a fear scream, it's a pain response scream. So whatever they're doing to him, they're hurting him. And then I knew my turn was coming. I ended up in the entire interior of this thing was incredibly brightly lit. I mean, it was like a ball stadium at night times 10. And I think that's why I came out of this with a severe sunburn. I didn't blister, but I had burns on my, everywhere, on my body, on my scalp, on the soles of my feet, under my arms. We also both suffered arc-like burns, like an arc welder. If they don't use that shield, they can burn their eyes. And our eyes were badly burned, very painful. And I was on the table, and I was immobile. I don't recall straps or anything. Somehow they just had me immobile on this table, and they were doing something to my lower back, and it hurt like hell. And I'm screaming, but I can't hear anything. And I fill my lungs with air, and I scream as loud as I can scream, and nothing comes out. And I don't get it, and I keep trying to scream so I can hear my voice. And there is this insectoid-looking thing. I mean, a praying mantis. This thing looked like a giant bug. And in my mind's eye, I see him in a white lab coat. And I don't know if that was actually real or if that was manufactured by my memory somehow. I see him with this large insectoid triangular-shaped head with the 2 bulbous eyes, and my screaming must have annoyed him, because he stood up where he had been bending down, doing something to my lower back, and the little gray guys are there helping him out. He stands up, and he tilts his head to one side and looks at me with this big eye, and I could hear him crystal clear in my head, and it said to me, "Why are you screaming? Stop screaming. You know we don't hurt you. You know we take you back. Now stop screaming." And then it tapped me on top of my head with this green digit, and I was out, and I was unconscious. And my next memory was they had dumped us near our car, or near my car, and just dumped us in the middle of the grass there. And I thought, somebody screwed up. We should be in the tent. Well, sure enough, here come these little gray guys, and they dragged us forcibly into our tent and just kind of threw us in there. Some of the things they're incredibly strong, and I have a theory about them, and that is that I don't think that they're sentient beings. I don't think they have a soul or a mind or empathy, or I think that they are like little robots, is what, what's his name, Calvin Parker. Calvin, I don't know if you've ever talked to Calvin. He's got a great story.
I actually, I interviewed Calvin not that long ago, actually. That video hasn't been published yet, but or that interview yet, but I have talked to him, actually.
He's a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, I had a great time talking to him. He was very, I thought he was really cool.
Oh, he's affable, he's likable, and he's real honest and open about being hurt. And about, this wasn't a fun experience. This was something that changed his life. And
well, I guess that was something else. I guess that was something. I wanted to ask you too. I mean, do you feel like? I asked him the same question. I mean, did you feel? I mean, I know that you said, looking back at it now, that you don't think that they were purposely trying to be malicious, but at the time after it was over, when you reflected upon it, let's say an immediate aftermath, the first couple weeks or months or a couple days even. Like, did you get like a sense of evil from them? Like, did you feel like...
I did.
Okay.
I did. I sure did.
Now, I'm not...
I say, that softened a little bit, but I was, number one, I was scared to death. And this was not that long. I think The Exorcist came out in 1973. So, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, my event happened in June. And actually nationwide in June of 1977, there were countless. There were many, many events.
So you brought up The Exorcist, and I was just about to ask that. I mean, did you think when it first happened to you, I mean, did you at any time think it was like a demon or some kind of more spiritual type entity, or did you always believe that these were like extraterrestrial aliens from a different planet or whatever dimension or universe?
I've grappled with that question all my life. I really have. I got a vibe from them that we were, we were like mold in a petri dish, and if they wanted to, they could just toss us in a trash can. And they didn't, for whatever reason. And I'm grateful that they didn't kill us. They sure as hell hurt us, but they didn't kill us. And this sounds crazy, but this is the way my mind has settled it. I have a feeling that, like Dr. Bug, the thing that hurt my lower back so badly. I think if we sat down at a table and had a beer together or a cup of coffee, I think he would be probably a nice dinner guest, and I think he would tell me, "Hey, just doing my job, man." And maybe that's a little bit of Stockholm syndrome or something, my way of coping. But evil doesn't necessarily have to be pea soup. I mean, evil could be, I don't mean this the way it sounds. I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way. But I'm certain that Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin could have been very affable, entertaining, dinner guest.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm trying to think of what were some of the. Who was the serial killer that there was just that Netflix special on that Zach Braff played? Was it Jeffrey Dahmer? Like, I think in that, wasn't Jeffrey Dahmer? Wasn't he like known to be this person that was very likable and very like a normal guy? Like people could sit down with and hang out with. And you're right. I mean, I think that there is a little bit of that sentiment of just because you're like evil and you're doing evil things, it doesn't mean you're uncontrollably evil all the time. I mean, you might have a good, like what you're talking about, you might have a personable side to you. You might be able to, you can get lunch with your grandmother and hang out with her for a couple hours and then at night do some, evil things. And it's so weird to think about, but I think you're right that some people just are able to disassociate so much from like an act versus, another act. And that could be like what you're experiencing too. So, I mean, it might not be that they're always evil doing evil things, but it could just be, hey, I do this, and then when I get back home or whatever, I just take off my shoes and just have a normal day or whatever.
Yeah, they have an agenda. Yeah, it's an interesting thought. My undergraduate degree is in psychology. As I was either going to go to, I wanted to either go to law school or medical school, and my math skills didn't carry me through the MCAT too well, so I ended up going to law school instead, which was fine. I have no regrets. I loved being a lawyer, but I got to see a lot of different kinds of people, especially when I started practicing and I was doing a lot of criminal defense work. I got to see people that were genuinely evil, and you could sense evil around them. You could sense it, and I had a 12-year-old kid that I was scared to death of. I was court-appointed to represent this kid. He was 12 years old. The guards would usually bring my client down and just let the kid sit at the table, and we'd have a conversation. They brought this kid in shackles. He's 12 years old, and normally the guards leave us, let us have privacy, attorney-client privilege, that kind of thing. The guards would not. They are the court order that nobody be allowed to be alone with this kid. And the most striking thing about this kid was this. At first glance, you see a normal 12-year-old kid, but then you look him in the eye, and there's something missing. There's nothing in back of those eyes, and it's scary. It's scary because it has that quality that those things had in the metal. They're not human beings. Human beings are sentient beings that understand empathy and ethics, right from wrong, that other things can feel pain. And, true psychopaths, they kind of done away with the term psychopath, sociopath. That's not used so much anymore. But, there are people out there with behavioral issues that are just absolutely incapable of caring. That's scary that we got those people walking the streets.
No, you're totally right. So after this event happened, what immediately happened? Like the next day. I mean, did you tell a lot of people about the event that occurred, or did you what happened? And then how does that relate to the microchip that was found inside of you?
That's a great setup. Because that actually tells me right where to go. It's a good spot to be. In 1977, I tried to downplay the thing. I wouldn't admit that we saw a UFO, but they knew. I don't know how they knew, but they knew.
Wait, when you say they, do you mean your friends or family or coworkers?
No. We were hospitalized for a couple of nights.
Oh, and, okay.
On my third night, there came 2 OSI agents into the room with us. OSI stands for Office of Special Investigations. And OSI is to the Air Force what NCIS is to the Navy, if that makes sense.
Okay.
It's the investigative branch of the United States Air Force. And these 2 guys in blue business suits came in with my night nurse. They kind of followed her into the room, and she had an injection she was going to give me for pain. And this agent says, if that's gonna make him drowsy, he's just going to have to wait. We need to ask Sergeant Lovelace some questions. That was an interesting interrogation. And at the end of the interrogation, I consider myself an ethical person, and for that reason, I try not to lie. I know it's just a play of semantics, but I try not to lie. If I can get away with it, I'd rather tell the truth because that's the right thing to do. And
obviously something of this. And I mean, obviously, something of this magnitude too. I mean, it might be easier to tell your wife a white lie, or I was only in this store for 5 minutes. It's 10 minutes. But this was something that was so traumatic. I mean, how could you even, unless you're an exceptionally good liar, how can you even lie about this?
I can't imagine it. Now, my wife is the only person that I was absolutely candid with. But I was going to say the reasons that these guys knew. I know that they knew because the nurse left, the captain left, who was below the major who was doing the interrogation. They had the lights turned out in my room because my eyes had that arc burn weld thing going on where my eyes hurt. The major had turned the lights on when he started the interrogation. And now that he's done with the interrogation, and there's just the two of us in this room, and he took his hand and made sure it leaned against the door to make sure the door was shut. And he turned the lights off, which I thought was odd. Why would he be kind now? He turned the lights off, and he kind of got this facial affect of a human being again. And he gets down next to me, and he had this real thick Southern accent, kind of a Calvin Parker kind of accent. And he says, "Son, I know, and you know, you two knuckleheads stumbled onto something out there, and I think you know what I mean." "Oh, I know you know what I mean, don't you?" And I was just stunned. I didn't know what to say. And he said, "You have a reputation for being a photographer within the hospital squadron." He says, "All I want is I want to know how many pictures of it you took, and I want your film." And he says, "You will do that for me, or this will end very badly for you." So he knew. I don't know how he knew, but he knew.
And you hadn't taken any photos, right?
Didn't. Okay. I forgot my camera, which isn't a big deal. Toby had a camera. But what's crazy is neither one of us ever thought to use it. That weird sedation effect. Neither one of us had the wits about us to grab a camera and use it. It just didn't. The thought just never crossed our minds. It's crazy.
So I wanted to ask you real quick too. So after, I guess, what was the transition like from going from the campsite to the hospital? I mean, do you clearly remember it? And was it like immediate? Like you went directly from the campsite to the hospital, or was there, like, what was that process like? Sorry, I don't know if
that process was interesting. I'll tell you,
okay.
I didn't want to leave the tent. I was afraid to leave the tent. I just had a layer of canvas over my head, but I felt that gave me cover. Cover means you're hidden. Yeah. And I felt some level of protection from that. And I told him, "Toby, man, I don't want to go out there." And he's like, "I don't either, but we gotta go, man."
And this is still dark out, right?
Oh yeah, it's 5 a.m. It's they always say it's the darkest before the dawn. Well, it was that night. It sure was, because it was awful dark. Even with a trillion stars out, it was dark. And I think part of that too was our eyes were so badly burned from whatever they did to us. But we bolted from that tent, got in the car. And the strangest thing happened, and I don't understand it now. I don't understand it to this day. But I'm not unique. This has happened to other people. Other people who have had these kind of experiences have reported the exact same thing, and that is, I wanted nothing to do with Toby, and I did not understand that emotion. And here this guy was. He's like my brother. He's like my best friend in the world. We worked together. Our wives, did things together. They hung out, and, we planning our careers and just like brothers. And somehow they alter your mind somehow. They have that ability to change how you think, how you feel. Because I wanted nothing to do with him. I did want to say goodbye to him one last time, and we were ordered to have no contact with one another.
Oh, really?
And they gave him absolutely. We were told, "You will not." Base commander told me, "You will have no contact with Senior Airman Tobias," and he says that means not through a third party, not through your mother, not through your priest. You'll have no telephone conversations. He just hammered home, you'll have nothing to do with this guy. He says, if you're in the frozen food section of the grocery store and he turns around the aisle, he says, you better be damn sure you turn around and go the opposite direction. So they were serious.
So has this lasted for the rest of, since then? Do you guys ever talk now or not really?
Yeah, well, there's an interesting twist to the story, and I'll get to it because it is an interesting twist. And like I say, I didn't want to see Toby, but I did because I think at some level I felt responsible. So we were coming home from the grocery store. My wife was driving, and I said, Sheila, please pull over. I want to run in and just say goodbye to Toby. I'll make it quick, but I want to see the guy. And she's like, we're ordered not to have anything to do with the guy. And I'm like, I know. And she says, don't mess with these OSI people, Terry. They scare me. I said, I know, they scare me too. I said, just pull over. I'll run in the house, and I'll be out in 4 minutes, and maybe that'll give me some peace. So I did that. I went up and I ran to the door, same doorway I had walked through 100 times before. And I walked in the house, and Toby's wife, Tammy, was walking around a corner, and she was angry. You could tell she was angry. And she said, "You're not supposed to be here." And I said, I know, but I understand you guys got orders. I know you're going to Japan. I want to say goodbye to Toby. And I guess Toby heard me, because he came around the corner, and I was blown away. I was shocked. Toby was always peculiar. He was always concerned about his personal appearance. He was very particular. Everything, his shoes were always shined. He was always, his hair was always cut. He was always meticulous about his appearance. And the guy that comes around the corner is disheveled, unshaven. He's got on a dirty T-shirt, dirty jeans, and bare feet. And I want to make it clear now, he was not a drinker. We would have a barbecue, and he'd maybe have a can of beer. I'd never known him to finish another beer. He might drink a can and a half. And when he was shorter than I was, and I can't get across how awkward the situation was. I mean, I felt like I should have embraced this guy, and it just felt unreal. And I didn't embrace him. We did this kind of awkward exchange until we finally shook hands. And like I say, he was a shorter guy, and he was looking down. And actually, I was looking at my toes and my shoes, and I didn't know what to say. And he looked up at me, and we made eye contact. And he said, "It happened, didn't it, Terry?" And I said, "Yeah, Toby, it all happened. And you're not losing your mind, my brother. It all happened." And he said, "But why? Why'd they hurt us, Terry?" I said, "Toby, I don't know, man. I don't think we'll ever know. I have no idea." And with that, I didn't engage in eye contact again. I just turned and ran to the car, and we got out of there. And that was the last time I saw my friend. He got orders cut to Japan and was gone in a matter of weeks. I mean, that's light speed. And we heard through mutual friends that he and Tammy had split up, and also heard that he had developed a drinking problem. And about 5 years after this, I'm out of the Air Force. And one fact I want to slide in here real fast before I forget it, and then I want to pick up where I'm leaving off here. But when I first got out of the Air Force, I became a runner. And I was an on-again, off-again runner for 40-plus years. And I noticed that every time I'd hit the 2-mile mark in my run, there was a spot on my knee that would go completely numb. And that would last about 30 minutes after my run. I could take a pin and define the outline of it. It was the craziest thing. And I asked my doctor, and my doctor blows it off. He says, "Well, does it affect your run?" "Well, no." "Well, don't worry about it." So I didn't. But that's where the X-ray located the thing, was that numb spot. But back to Toby, my friend Toby. About 5 or 6 years after I'm out of the Air Force, I decided I want to try to reach out to him. So I had some information about where he was, and I was working on a federal case at the time. And I asked this FBI agent, who I thought I knew pretty well. I said, "Hey, dude, can you do me a favor? I need to find a buddy I was in the military with back in the 70s. Here's his name. Here's his father's name. Here's his father's address, and a couple of other items of information, date of birth. I said, this is all that I know. And he says, no big deal. I'll have him for you in 2 weeks. Well, a week later, he calls me up and he says, oh, man, I'm so sorry. Your friend passed away. Mm-hmm. I said, what? And he says, yeah, it's very unfortunate. It was an accident of some type. But yeah, your buddy's gone. And I was stunned and hurt. But I've had to accept that's what it is and move on with it.
Wait, because
years later.
Wait, because how old were you at this point? You were like in your 30s, or?
Yeah, mid-30s.
Okay.
So, here I am. I'm doing this book, right? I'm thinking my buddy's dead. I'm writing this book in 2016. And I thought, I don't want it for deference to the family. I don't want to use the real name, but I can pull up the obit and make a nice addition to my book for sake of documentation. So I went and I found an obit, all right, but this was in 2016, and the obit was dated September 7th, 2007, out of Bay City, Michigan.
Wow.
The agent had lied to me. The guy back in the early 80s, 86 or whatever, 85, lied to me. And I don't understand that at all.
And, I mean, I mean, like, to, go to your point, I mean, it's not like today where, you just look on Facebook or Instagram, you look for someone and you can find them. I mean, this is a time where, I mean, you would have had to hire a private detective to look for him. Or like what you did in your case, it was an FBI agent. Like, yeah, it's not like today where you can easily find anybody online if they want to be found.
Right. Well, I believe that this guy intentionally lied to me. And I think he was under orders to lie to me. I really believe that. Because they did not want the two of us together. And if you think about it, I'm telling a story that's, right off the crazy train. I mean, really, I'm telling the truth. People that know me know that I tell the truth. But I'm asking the public to believe an awful lot of stuff. An awful lot of crazy stuff. But, the world's a much, much bigger place than we think it is. And there are a lot of crazy things out there.
So for the chip that was in your leg, I mean, so did you get it removed, and do you still physically have it, or what ended up happening with it?
Here's what happened with that. I had no idea the chip was in my leg. I had no intent of writing a book whatsoever or telling the public about this event. And then on October 2012, I got stood up, got out of bed in the morning, and I couldn't support weight on my right leg. And I fell. And it wasn't the fall that hurt my leg. I had a benign cyst in my leg, called a Baker's cyst. It has nothing to do with baking, of course. It's, discovered by a guy named Baker and named after him. But they're always benign, and they're just painful, and they hurt for a couple weeks, and they always resolve on their own. So, but I went to the hospital because I didn't know what it was, and these are things. Understand, in the X-rays that I'll send you, you'll see below my legs there are like 3 little marble-like things. Pardon me, 5 marble-sized things. You'll see them in the X-ray. They're obvious. You don't need a medical degree to see them. They're right in the calf muscle of my leg. And then above my leg is a what looks like a computer chip. I mean, it looks just like a computer chip. The round marble-like things are still in my leg. The first thing I wanted to do when I saw them in 2012 was, I want them out. I want these things out of me. And unfortunately, I'd had a heart attack in 2007. And to get a surgeon to agree to remove the things for me required a cardiac clearance letter. It's the standard of care. It's what's done in this country medically. It's, if you're going to have a benign object removed from your body, you got to have a cardiac clearance letter. And because of my heart attack and because of some issues I have with my heart, no cardiologist in the world would give me a cardiac clearance letter. So I was stuck with these things in my leg and was actually planning on either St. Luke's Hospital in Manila, because I had some experience with them. I knew that they were very, very competent, or maybe a Mexican or Colombian medical center and have them removed. But I had some pretty strict criteria. I wanted them removed. I wanted to see them removed and placed in my hand so that I establish a well-entrenched chain of custody so there's no confusion about, well, these aren't the things that came out of your leg. Well, yeah, they are, because I made sure I followed them. But I woke up one morning on November 16th, 2017, and I woke up about 6 a.m., and it felt like somebody hit me in the leg with a baseball bat. And the bruises weren't evident at first, but by the end of the day, I was black and blue all over the top of my legs. And, try to find an X-ray on demand. You can't do it. You got to have a doctor's order to get an X-ray. And I was having trouble doing that. And I stumbled into this the chiropractor's office, right? And he's busy. But he says he just squeezed me in. So I wait 45 minutes, and I've got photocopies of my X-rays in my hand. And he says, okay, where do you hurt? And I said, well, Doc, I've got these bruises on my leg, but I'd like to show you these X-rays. And I hold them up in front of his face, and I said, you see, in 1977, I was abducted by aliens while I was wilderness camping, and I think that these aliens implanted these things in my leg. While I'm telling him this, everybody in the waiting room, their eyes are about as big as saucers, and this guy has me by the elbow, and he's leading me to the front door. And all I could think was, chiropractors must look at 100 X-rays a week. So if I could just get this guy's attention, he would see them. And he did. And he stopped dead in his tracks. And he said, whoa. And he said, come with me. And we went into his office, and, his phone's ringing and people are banging at the door. And he says, tell me about this. And I told him the capsule version. And there's no doubt in my mind this guy's an experiencer. He's had some interaction with ET. He told me, he says, I'm going to pay for your X-ray, and I'll read it for you and help you any way I can. But don't you dare ever use my name or the name of my clinic. Do we have a gentleman's agreement? And I said, yes, we do, doctor. And we shook hands, and I left with my order to get an X-ray. And I went and got an X-ray right away. And he asked to drop it off. And my wife and I looked at it, and clearly that computer chip thing was gone. So in a way, I was relieved. But in a way, I was kind of disappointed because I lost my evidence. The little marble things were still there. But the computer chip was gone.
Wait, so you're saying that the chips, so you're saying that basically in the process of you planning to have them medically taken out of you, that they were basically taken out unknowingly one evening?
They were taken out while I was asleep.
Wow.
I absolutely believe that. And I think the documents support that. The crazy thing is I dropped the X-rays off the chiropractor's office, and he calls me up after dinner that evening. He says, well, did you see your X-ray? And I said, yeah, I don't know how to feel about it, but it is what it is. And he says, well, they left you something. And I'm like, what? And I made copies of my x-rays. So I had a copy to look at, and he showed me where to look. And I include copies of them in my book. You can see them. There are two very tiny wires parallel to one another. And they're so tiny, they're difficult to see on an x-ray or on paper. They're easier to see if you have the x-ray film and you can actually hold it up to a light source, then they're pretty obvious. But you can see them, they're there. Two tiny parallel wires about a quarter of an inch long, parallel to my right femur. And those two objects are still there.
Wow. So they're still inside your body as of this moment right now?
Yes.
Wow. Dang. Jeez. So I guess when did the book get... So after that happened, is that when you started the process of writing the book?
Well, the process of writing the book, after I knew I had these things in my leg, I was stunned. I mean, the radiologist looked at my x-rays, and the technician was really frustrated, and she took a bunch of films. She took like 24 films, 24 x-rays of my leg. And she called for the radiologist to come down. The radiologist comes down, and they have a conversation out of my earshot. And he's talking to the to the technician, and the radiologist walks over and takes his finger and pokes me in the leg and says, "Yeah, you turn the lights on, we'll find it. It'll be right here." And I'm like, "Doctor, pardon me, what will be right here?" And he says, "There's going to be a scar there." He says, "You can't violate the integrity of skin to embed an object this deep in the muscle and fascia and there not be a scar. It can't happen. There has to be a scar there. The human body is made that way." And I said, "Doctor, you're not going to find a scar." And he was visibly shaken. And he said, "Well, a lot of times these things are hard to see, and scar tissue will fluoresce under a black light." So he sent his intern up to grab a black light, and they looked. And sure enough, there is no scar. And I asked him, I said, "So, doctor, how did these things get into my leg?" And his answer just stunned me. It was, "By means unknown to medical science." And I thought that was a pretty cool, pretty accurate answer.
Wow. Man, I'm sure there's even more things to even say, but so do you feel like, I mean, I guess we'll just kind of maybe wrap up a little bit. Like, do you feel like, did you ever have another encounter after the Devil's Den incident, like that you clearly remember? I mean, do you remember ever seeing potentially like a UFO, or did you?
Oh man, brother, I'll tell you, I've got over 100 pictures of UFOs. After 2016, I noticed that if I went out at certain times of the day and I took photographs of empty sky, and I blew them up and I looked at them carefully, I'd find either a helicopter or a UFO, or in some cases both. And then things kind of changed. And I would just have this feeling I should go out and photograph now. And I'd go out and photograph, and sure enough, there'd be a UFO in the photograph. And I can see them now with my naked eye. My wife can't. I can see one, and I'm pointing right to it, and she can't see it. And we'll take a picture with our phone, and they'll show up on the picture. But since I wrote the book, several very odd things happened, including this, it's cliche. Yeah, black helicopters, right? I mean, it's laughable, but it's true. I mean, we had these unmarked helicopters, and I went berserk because I went out and I'm photographing them, and they came in one of four varieties. There was a Roberts 22, a Roberts 44, an Airbus 350, and then there were two other military, including an Apache. So I got pictures of all these helicopters, and none of them have a mark on them of any kind, anywhere. And federal law under 29 Codified Rules of Federal Regulation, Codified Federal Regulation, CFR 29, where it talks about aviation law, says that if you're going to register and fly a helicopter in the United States, it must display an N number. Pardon me, an N letter. The alphabetical letter N, like Nancy, has to be displayed in a big enough, large enough that it can be easily seen. And then that's followed by a string of numbers to identify that particular aircraft. And then the N designation means that it's registered in the United States. But there were no markings on these things. Matter of fact, there's the March 29th of 2019. The headline in the Dallas Morning News is, "Why are there so many military helicopters over Dallas?" Well, I know why. They were over my house. You know, it's just crazy. I put together a PowerPoint presentation, and I went to the Dallas MUFON meeting, and I showed all of this to them, and they were blown away. They were absolutely blown away.
Oh, dang. All right, Terry. Well, definitely. This was a very good conversation. I think maybe let's try to plan something in the future to do another episode about maybe, a little bit more of the follow-up after Devil's Den and maybe some more of the, instances that you had. But definitely, I want to thank you so much for coming on. And how can we buy your book, or where can we buy it, and how can we follow the newest updates with you?
Thank you. My book is on Amazon.
Okay.
And the name of the book is Incident at Devil's Den. You can go straight to Amazon and buy it, or you can go to my website, which hopefully will be up and running, terrylovelace.com. But probably the easiest, quickest way is just go to Amazon. And my book has photographs, and it has photographs of the X-rays, including the ones showing the items had been removed and the tiny wires. So it's gotten some good reviews. I'm very proud of it. I've got 230, 4.6 out of 5 stars. So I feel very, very good about the book. It's been very well received.
Excellent. All right, Terry. Well, definitely thank you so much. And yeah, let's talk again maybe in a few months or so. But yeah, I want to thank you again for coming on, and have a good rest of your day.